Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 26th. Well, it gets better and better every day. It's like, I love the Iranian response on what's going on with you negotiating with yourself. Of course, you're going to get exactly the response you want. Yeah, I couldn't disagree with that. That was funny. It sort of reminded me of Bob, Baghdad Bob, or if you remember him, some of the things he would say was pretty good stuff. From a market standpoint, fairly simple here for us here. Well, if you want a benign trade, you simply look at the 23% right there, which happens to be 66.27. Above that, you can go long. Below that, you got to be short. It's just that simple. So that keeps it easy, simple, because through all of the rhetoric, dialogue, whatever, you're going to get some movement. And I still think that we're overall in a bearish situation because even though, yes, we did have the dip, look at that. You're already about to get orange, and you've already got a rejection now of cyan to green. That usually results in a significant downturn, coupled with the fact that you are DOC steel here. Short-term buyers, not reset. You need that crossover. Didn't happen. So yeah, that's sort of what I call one of those continuation lower signals. Does it matter what the rhetoric is? No, because the clock is ticking. Look, you said you've degraded the military, that the RAN is useless, can't do anything. You would think that the bombings would have stopped in Israel. You think that the Hormuz Strait would be open. None of those are true. So the pretty simple metrics to determine whether you're successful or not. And I don't think we have any evidence to suggest that that's really been the case. Now, from an NQ standpoint, it's very clean that we haven't changed in the short situation. So, no change whatsoever. Look at that's perfect. Exactly what we look for when we talk about a continuation move. Cyan, red, and you have orange caught between them. The spread expanding. As the spread expands, in this particular case, you get further reduction to the downside. So straightforward, doesn't require much thinking. Um, yeah, it's just beautiful. So love it. No issues with that. Oil on its way back up. Now it's an interesting one on oil because we just saw the numbers coming in from the crude builds, and that was pretty large because of the Venezuelan imports coming into the U.S. Now, the rest of the world could be suffering significantly more, but they didn't have to touch the strategic reserve or any of that to maintain the plus volumes. So, the distillates, as far as gasoline and that, a little behind. Okay, that's because people front loaded and everyone went and ran and bought gas. But um, that's going to be an interesting one because you could get a bifurcation between what the world is paying versus what's actually happening in the U.S. via supply and excess. They can only keep adding millions. I mean, they added 3+ million barrels. You can only add so much more to storage before you're going to have to start selling it at whatever price you can get rid of it because you get too much coming in. So that's an interesting one, worth noting. But from a global standpoint, no. I mean, yeah. 93 right now. That's actually still fairly conservative. You could easily go back above the 100 if the supposed negotiations are really not negotiations, but just self-messaging between other parties. And I don't even know who you're supposed to be contacting. I mean, how they determined who was in charge of anything. If they were in charge of something, then wouldn't you have had a stop of the blockage in the Hormuz, and you wouldn't be seeing bombs landing in Israel, I would think, but I don't know. Yeah, we actually do know they would have stopped if they were actually in contact. So don't fool yourself. It's just I was being, you know, facetious, a little bit of hyperbole. Why not? Because it's all sort of ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, the euro, mamma mia. When you look at the numbers coming out of Germany, the leader of economic activity is a nightmare situation. That it's holding up where it is just because they hate Trump. Literally, there's no other justification for it because the Eurozone's a disaster. Um, Gold to that, I mean, you're going to have an inflation spike from this to some degree, but that's a bit conflicting, and you can see why gold would be down given what we saw from that oil crude build. Uh, it's a bit problematic because if that continues, you would end up slight deflationary situation. Add in some of the positive immigration rulings, and that you could see some further decrease in rental prices in the U.S. And some of those things will be easing factors to this. So it's ugly, but not 100% ugly all the way around. That's just no excitement whatsoever from a Bitcoin standpoint in that. Nothing happened in there, and the short hasn't changed from a 50K standpoint. When we look at our 5K, this is interesting. This is the program working some of the adjustments, and the white candles representing the uh, short configuration along with the blue, just different mixes of MBI with DOC and the spreads, and how as that spread increases, you get a continuation move of the negative flow. And this is the current 5K, so you can see how it looks exactly like the daily there. You started with the narrowing right there where it was a little bit bullish, and then as it spread, first negative begins, and as it increases in the distance between them, so you have the distance between the cyan and the green, and then you have the distance between the red DOC and cyan as it grows, and then also from a short term less weighted, the orange to steel relationship. But yeah, that's all pretty clean action. Doesn't require a whole lot of thought when you look at it from that standpoint. I can actually give you a little bit broader range, and then I'll throw in. So it tends to follow that pretty clean, and then we end up with these slight little anomaly setups. Uh, but once you add in the conditions of requiring my orange to be below green DOC, a lot of those will get eliminated as well. But you will get some of the smaller pops will regain their early buy entry. So that'll be fun. Once that's finalized, then gets incorporated into our regular Deocon paint, which actually will all turn into just the MBI indicator paint bar. So do the same thing. And you can see this is Deocon paint 2A, the normal one. And yeah, it's still been the same negative, but uh, we'll certainly be able to create a nice continuation move and then convert those into actual trade setups. So that'll give you lots of different entry possibilities and that, which is what I think is a neat thing, because throughout all of these contractions, expansions, you have all sorts of opportunities on plus moves in that are outside of where the spreads are suggesting prices got to go, and makes it easy to attack those bumps in prices where the indicators or even oscillators would be like jumping up and down all over the place, and that's where a lot of people get scared of this kind of volatility. But I think it's just opportunity to run with it. The gains that from this setup are just fantastic. You can't even object to it. It's just so clean. But that's just my view of it, and that just shows you where we're going direction wise as far as indicators and the strategies that have come from it, which will give multi-phase. And at a 5K level, once you have that conquered, there's pretty much nothing else you have to think about, because this is our earliest transition before you move towards 10K, 25K, and then a 50K, which 10 times the range. So if you're able to capture it 100% accurate early, or at least uh, high percentage in the 80s in that, and have a congruent reading from a higher move, wow, just the confluence of that just makes everything perfect. So anyway, that's the direction of things for April. So it's very exciting. As always, though, anything relevant, I'll put it on the team chat. But you know, if you follow the headlines, you're going to get a lot of whipsaw action, whatever. I think that those that don't have the indicators, that simple daily call makes it pretty straightforward. Likewise, here from a 50K chart, anything below the 6630 is still short. So can't make it any easier than that. As always, have a good one. Trade well.